Good morning. My name's Billy, if you haven't met me. I've been thinking a lot this week about the word enemy. We use it a lot. We use it of political enemies, cultural enemies, sports enemies, the people on the other side of whatever line it is that we've happened to draw on this week. We have social media enemies, people who we've never met, but we are absolutely certain they are wrong about everything. We have everyday enemies, like the coworker who keeps CCing your boss. Love that one. Or the person who says, as per my last email, or the neighbor whose dog keeps barking incessantly, the person who doesn't use their turn signal, the person who's in the express lane with 23 items, and my favorite, the person who microwaves fish in the office kitchen. We also have lifestyle enemies. We have people who parent differently than we do. They spend money differently than we do or think they should do. They vote differently than we do. They eat or they don't eat pineapple and pizza like we do. We have what I'm calling today's shower enemies. If you know this one, the people who you remember wronged you 5 years or 10 years or 20 years ago. And we rehearse the argument in the shower like it's going to be coming up in court next week. Or maybe more poignantly, it's the person in our family that annoyed and frustrated us, and we didn't have the perfect comeback then, but after a few minutes in the shower, yep, right, you've got a few serious clinchers and zingers ready, and you can say the perfect thing, and finally you will win. We even have church enemies, people who love the same God but phrase it slightly differently, and so we quietly move them to the enemy column. And we have, of course, the comment section enemies, the people we don't actually know, but who we have a lot of opinions about, and we feel free to call them names and assume all sorts of things about them. But here's the strange thing. We know, if we stop and think about it, that no one on our side is right about everything. No one on our side is right about everything, and no one on their side is right about everything. You don't believe everything that your political party says. You don't agree with every opinion in your friend group. You've heard someone on your team say something that made you cringe. And yet somehow we drift in this posture where we defend their whole system, where if they said it, we're in. If the other side said it, we're out. We know it's not true. We know it's not wise, and yet we seem to do it anyways. We are incredibly skilled at identifying and labeling enemies that cannot actually destroy us. We can name them, we can argue with them, we can post about them. We can win against them, at least in our own heads. So much winning. But while we're busy doing that, while we are sorting and labeling and defending and rehearsing, the one thing that actually can take everything from us moves quietly through every one of our lives. Not loudly. It's not out there somewhere with those people. It doesn't show up as an argument. It shows up in a hospital room where the conversation suddenly changes tone. It shows up in a phone call that divides your life into before and after. It shows up in the moment that you realize this is not going to get better. When you realize that this is ending. It's the thing that takes people you love and does not give them back. The thing that empties chairs at tables. That silences voices you still expect to hear. That leaves you standing in rooms that look the same but are not the same. It's the one enemy that you cannot reason with. You cannot outwork, cannot outvote, cannot outlast. It does not care what side you're on. It does not care how right you are. It does not negotiate. It doesn't make any deals. It just takes, and it keeps taking and taking a person and then another person and another person until eventually it comes to you. The writers of Scripture do not let us avoid this enemy. They do not dress it up. They don't call it natural. They don't call it beautiful. Paul says it very clearly, the last enemy to be destroyed is death. Over the last 5 weeks, we have not rushed past death. We have not softened it. We've not dressed it up. We've not called it natural or beautiful. We have called it what Scripture calls it, the last and final enemy. We have said that grief is wounded love, that you only grieve what you loved, and that grief itself is not weakness, but it is honesty. We have said that lament is not despair, not polite prayer, but honest prayer, the kind that says, God, this is not what your world is supposed to look like, the kind of prayer that is protest. We have also said that tears tell the truth, that when you cry, you are not falling apart. You are telling the truth about a world that is not as it should be. We have said that tears tell the truth about the world, that shalom was broken, and that you and I were made for something better than this world. And last week, Jonathan reminded us of something that Christians have known for centuries, that there is wisdom in keeping death before our eyes and committing ourselves into God's hands before sleep, rehearsing the surrender you will one day make for real, and echoing the words of Jesus, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. Talking about death is not morbid, I would suggest. It is a crucial part of spiritual formation. And so, if you have felt the weight of these weeks, I do not apologize. You should feel it. You and I, we are not into denial here in this place. But if all of that is true, what do we do with it? If death is real, if grief is real, if the world is broken, is that just how it is? To which Paul would say with vigor, and my mother-in-law would say with some humor, don't be ridiculous. The message of the cross and the tomb is that God is present in our darkest places, but the message of Easter Sunday is that the darkest place is not the end, because on the third day, something happened, something that changed everything. And so Christianity is not something that is just an idea or a feeling or a metaphor. Christianity claims that something happened physically with a person in a body that experienced real pain, real suffering, real death, and who was put in a tomb for 3 days. But a body who didn't stay there. A tomb that was left empty, a body that breathed again, a voice that called out names again. Resurrection is not about leaving the world behind. about floating away from your body, from history, from everything that hurts. Resurrection is not God giving up on what he made. It is God saying, I am not abandoning this world. I'm not discarding these bodies. I am not surrendering this story to death. I am going to redeem it. Jesus' resurrection is not an exception or an unusual part of God's plan. It is the norm. Because death met Jesus, and for the very first time, it failed. The ultimate, the last enemy of humanity failed. Paul wrote in 1 Corinthians 15, the last enemy to be destroyed is death. And then at the end of a very long chapter about the implications of the resurrection of Jesus, Paul turns and speaks to death, not about it, but to it. Where, O death, is your victory? Where, O death, is your sting? Where is it? Come on. Where is it? Death, you had one job, one responsibility. You take, you end, you close the door. That's what you do. And you did the thing you did all the time. You took him, you stopped his breath, you stopped his heart from beating, you sealed the tomb, you shut it tight. They even put soldiers around it for you. And 3 days later, he walked out. You had the final word, you had the last move, the closing line, the sealed ending, and it wasn't good enough. You failed. So, now what are you going to do, death? Where is your victory? Where is your sting? Is that all you got? Come on! Church has been saying that for 2,000 years. This is how John Chrysostom put it in one of the earliest Easter sermons that we have from around 400 AD. He says, "Let no one fear death, for the death of our Savior has set us free. He has destroyed it by enduring it. Hell took a body and met God face to face. It took earth and encountered heaven. It took what it saw and was overcome by what it did not see. O death, where is your sting? O hell, where is your victory? Christ is risen, and you, O death, are annihilated." As I pondered the ending of our series this week, this is what I have felt. I know that death is coming. It is coming for my family. It is coming for our congregation. And death is coming for me. I can feel it in my bones. And I know that there will be pain and likely suffering. I know that one day my heart will stop, and I will stop breathing, and there will be a final breath. I'm not looking forward to that. But death can't keep me. Death cannot destroy who I am. And death will not be the end of my story. Death will put me to sleep, yep, but it cannot stop me from waking up again. Because death failed for the first time when it met Jesus. And because of that, death is going to fail again and again and again and again and again with me and you and all those who follow the way of Jesus. All those who follow the way of the cross all the way through the empty tomb, all the way to the promised life beyond. Death will not prevail. Life will win, and death will lose. Where, O death, is your victory? Where, O death, is your sting? You and I are going to stand at graves. The tears will come. The world is still broken. And we are not pretending that it is anything other than that. But something has changed. Because the grave is no longer a dead end. It is a doorway to life. Paul gives us a metaphor for what's going on. He says it's like a seed. You place it in the ground and it looks like loss. It looks like death. But it's not the end of the story. It's the place where something new begins. And so your grief, my grief, is not meaningless. Your tears are not wasted. The losses you carry, and we do, they are not final. And this is what resurrection means for the world. The suffering that we have witnessed and cannot fix, the injustice that grinds on, the evil that seems to go unanswered, the prayers that seem to disappear into the ceiling. These are not evidence that God has abandoned his great project of creation and us. They are not the end of the story. They're where God is already at work, even when we cannot see it yet. And so the resurrection of Jesus doesn't just change what happens sometime way off in the future. It changes what is running your life right now. The pattern of the Christian disciple is the way of the cross, to be sure. We follow Jesus through pain and suffering and death in our own lives. But the way of the empty tomb is also our pattern. The way of baptism that we have seen this morning is also the pattern of our life, that we die and we rise, and we die and we rise. New beginnings and hope, these are also our truth. So what do we do with all of this? I want to suggest that because of the resurrection, we become a different kind of people. We become people, first of all, who grieve honestly, because tears still tell the truth. We are people who stay in the grief as long as it needs to be stayed in, because we know that grief is not the end, but we also know that it cannot be rushed. We become people who stay present in hospital rooms, in quiet houses, in ordinary Tuesdays when grief comes back without warning. We are people who show up at the funeral, but we also stay 6 months later. We say the name of the person who died when everyone else has stopped saying it. We sit with someone in the dark and we do not try to fix it, and we do not look away. We become people who hope stubbornly, not because everything feels better, but because we know something that the darkness cannot change, that death has been defeated, that its power is broken, that the story is not over. And so we experience little deaths, but we also anticipate little resurrections, signs today of the future resurrection God has promised to all those who love him. We become people who commit to walking each other all the way home. We go into the hard places. We stay. We can be the answer to someone's fear that nobody is coming because we are here and we are not leaving. We can be the light that promises that dark cannot and will not ultimately triumph. And this is what it means to be the church. Not a community that has escaped death, but a community that has faced it and knows that death will not win. So, a few questions for you to think about. First of all, who in your life is in the darkness right now? Who needs you to be the light that promises both present and future hope? Second, what would you do differently this week if you actually believed in your bones that death does not get the last word? And finally, how can you help us as a church community to commit to walking each other home with both recognition of the reality of death, but also defiant hope in the reality of the coming resurrection? How can you help? We called this series Mortal. Is the right word? Because that's what we know, right? We break, we age, we lose, we return to the dust. That's the story that you and I know. But Paul says, actually, that's not right. Listen, I tell you a mystery. We will not all sleep, but we will all be changed. In a flash, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet, for the trumpet will sound, the dead will be raised imperishable, and we will be changed. For the perishable must clothe itself with the imperishable, and the mortal with immortality. It's a bit of a twist, isn't it? Paul says you don't get replaced. Doesn't say you get discarded. He says you get changed. You get clothed. You get a totally new outfit. Which means the future God has for you is not less real than this life. It is more. It's not thinner, it's not vaguer, it's not more abstract, it's not vanishing or floating away somewhere into the clouds. It's more. It's more solid, more alive, and more certain. The mortal puts on immortality. Death doesn't just lose its grip on us. It gets replaced by something stronger. Imagine everything that you have known that felt most alive, and then remove the fear that it'll end. Imagine love without the shadow of loss. Imagine a world where nothing fractures, nothing decays, and nothing is taken. This is the life we are promised. And then listen to the next verse. When the perishable has been clothed with the imperishable, and the mortal with immortality, then the saying that is written will come true: death has been swallowed up in victory. What is mortal will be swallowed up, not by death, but by life. All our lives we've assumed that death is going to swallow everything up. Death takes it all. And Paul says, no. Death is the thing that gets swallowed. Which means that death is not the end of your story and my story, not even close. The grief is real, but it is not final and it's not without hope. The loss is real, but it is not ultimate. The grave is real, but it's not permanent. Because Jesus went into that tomb, and then he came out. And death will never recover from that. And so now, every year on Easter Sunday certainly, but every day, we don't whisper our hope. We speak it. Christ is risen. We sing it. Christ is risen. We shout it out without restraint. Christ is risen. And we build our lives on it. Christ is risen. And because he is, death does not win. Death does not keep what it takes. Death does not get the last word. So, death, where is your victory? Where is your sting? You had your moment, you took your shot, and it wasn't enough. Death loses.